Hi everyone. So for this lesson, we're about to dive into something that's called enzymes. But before we get into what an enzyme is, what is its structure, what is its function, I want to first talk about some general characteristics that every living organism possesses. I won't be discussing all their characteristics, and I'll try to limit our discussion only to the characteristic that helps in our discussion of enzymes today. But the characteristics that basically help us differentiate a living organism from a non living organism includes the fact that organisms that are living can move, have the ability to grow and reproduce, and also have the ability to take in external nutrition, digest that and process that, and then excrete out any waste products that are produced in the process. But for the organism to carry out either of these characteristics, it must have the ability to carry out certain chemical reactions within its cells. Any typical reaction would involve certain raw materials or substrates that need to be converted into one or more final product. In certain chemical reactions, a raw material or a substrate is broken down into multiple products, in which case such a reaction is actually labeled as a catabolic reaction. An example of such a reaction would be respiration, where the cell breaks down a molecule of glucose into ATP, which is the molecule for energy, and also produces waste products in the form of carbon dioxide and water. Contrastingly, another type of reaction that can occur inside cells is an anabolic reaction, where two molecules are actually combined together or two substrates are combined together to produce one final product. Together, both the anabolic and catabolic reactions are termed as metabolism. And so, metabolism and the ability to carry out metabolic activities is a key feature of any living organism. But the only problem is that in order to carry out these metabolic reactions, the raw materials or substrates within a reaction must possess enough energy to actually convert into products. If we try and plot this on an energy diagram where we draw the energy of the products and the reactants on the y-axis and try and show the progress of reaction with time on the x-axis, we notice that the reactants actually start off with some amount of energy, but they need to actually gain a lot of energy before they can be converted into the final products, which have the least amount of energy and hence are more stable than the reactants initially. But if we were to wait for the reactants to gain this energy, which is actually called the activation energy, for the reaction to proceed, the reaction would take forever to be completed. There has to be some form of catalyzation that could either raise the energy of these reactants or decrease this activation energy so that the reaction can proceed at a much faster rate. Speaking outside of organisms, let's say in a chemical lab where we're trying to conduct different experiments and reactions, we use synthetic catalysts, which are molecules that basically help us to speed up a chemical reaction and are not altered in the process itself. Inside an organism, we obviously don't have synthetic catalysts because it's not a lab setting but actually a living environment for the cells. But the organisms instead have biological catalysts. These biological catalysts are called enzymes, and they are supposed to catalyze metabolic activities by lowering the activation energy for the reactant so that the reaction can proceed at a much faster rate than it would without the enzymes. The enzymes for living organisms are so important that without them, life would technically cease to exist. Because virtually no chemical reaction inside an organism's cell can happen without the assistance of enzymes. The enzymes, which are known as biological catalysts, are actually made of proteins. So the biological molecule making up these biological catalysts are amino acids. And since enzymes are proteins made of amino acids, they must also possess a primary structure, a secondary structure, a tertiary structure, and may or may not possess a quaternary structure. There are millions and millions of enzymes found within an organism, and each enzyme is different from another enzyme because they have a different primary sequence of amino acids. Because of that different primary sequence, the secondary and tertiary structure changes because the interaction between the R group of amino acid changes. But regardless of the fact that each enzyme is unique and different from another enzyme, the thing that is common between every single enzyme is the fact that each and every enzyme is a globular protein. So if you try and recall, proteins were of two types, fibrous and globular. Enzymes are always globular protein, and that's because their R groups within the amino acids are arranged in such a way that the hydrophobic R groups are facing inwards and the hydrophilic R groups are facing outwards. The reason for that is the fact that enzymes, in this case which are globular proteins, are moving through a medium that is polar in nature. For example, in the bodies of humans, enzymes are found both intracellularly and extracellularly. So, the enzymes can first of all be divided into two categories based on their location. One being intracellular, which is going to be inside the cell, and the second one being outside the cell, which is going to be called extracellular. For example, your digestive enzymes that help in digestion that are secreted from the cells outside of the cell is an example of an extracellular enzyme. Regardless of their location, the enzymes are always found in a polar medium. If they're intracellular, their primary medium is the cell cytoplasm, and if they're extracellular, they can either be found inside tissue fluids or be moved around in the blood, or the digestive tract, which contains various digestive juices. All these different environments contain some or little or some form of water that makes the environment polar. So, for these enzymes to be effective and to be able to do their function, they must also be able to dissolve in polar substances, which is why the polar R groups or the hydrophilic R groups are actually found on the surface of these globular proteins that make up the enzyme. Now, all enzymes are proteins, and most of them can function as simple proteins effectively and help lower the activation energy for chemical reactions that are occurring inside an organism's body. But some enzymes cannot function at all without the addition of a non-protein component. And as the name suggests, a non-protein component is going to be a molecule that is not protein in nature, but basically helps the enzyme to develop the correct shape for its active site to allow the substrate to bind to it. Now, you may ask what an active site is, and an active site is basically just a depression on the surface of the enzyme, and this is the site where a substrate can bind with the enzyme. Once the substrate binds to the enzyme, that's the time when the activation energy for the reaction can actually be lowered and the reaction can be allowed to proceed forward. This non-protein component can be of two types. Either it can be an organic non-protein component or an inorganic non-protein component. In case the non-protein component is inorganic, for example, iron or magnesium, this non-protein component is now going to be called a cofactor. But in case the non-protein component is an organic molecule, the non-protein component will be labeled as a coenzyme. Now, coenzymes can bind to an enzyme either permanently, in which case they are actually given the name of a prosthetic group, or they can bind for a transient time period as long as the reaction is occurring, and once the reaction is over, they can actually dissociate from the enzyme And in such a case, this coenzyme is going to be called a co-substrate. Now, most of the times when you will be coming across different reactions or different processes that happen inside mammals or inside plants, you would often read a term that is ending in the suffix ase. So, for example, amylase, lipase, um, peroxidase, all of these, or catalase, these basically are all examples of enzyme. The suffix ase will give away the information to you that the word that you just read is actually an example of an enzyme, and it's basically carrying out the functions of an enzyme. Enzymes can be divided into 6 subgroups based on the type of reactions that they're catalyzing. The first example is that of an oxidoreductase enzyme. These enzymes are involved in reactions that are called redox reactions. So, one side of the reaction would include one side of the reactions would include substrates that would either be oxidizing or reducing, and the other side of the reaction, where the product would contain products that has either been reduced or oxidized. So, such a reaction is catalyzed by enzymes that are called oxidoreductase. So, if you ever come across the term hydrogen reductase or carboxy reductase, that basically means that it is reducing the molecule of hydrogen, or it is reducing carbon dioxide or carbon molecule, something of that sort, basically. The word reductase will give that away to you, and you'd be able to tell what the reaction is actually being catalyzed, like what is the type of reaction that is being catalyzed. Similarly, hydrolases is another group of enzymes. These groups are a group of enzymes that are adding water to a reaction. So, for example, your molecule of glucose is hydrolyzed to release energy during the process of respiration. A lot of hydrolases would be involved. So, if you read the term hydrolases, chances are that a molecule is being broken down into two different molecules or more molecules by the addition of water. The third group is called a lyase. A lyase enzyme is also similar to a hydrolase enzyme, such that it is involved in the breakdown of substances. So it's mostly part of catabolic reactions where one raw material is being broken down into multiple subproducts. The last 3 groups are called isomerase, ligase, and transferase. An isomerase enzyme comes into play when one molecule is converted into an isomer of itself. So, for example, when glucose is converted into fructose, which is an isomer of glucose, an isomerase enzyme would be employed. Ligases are a group of enzymes that you'd come across a few of them when we discuss DNA replication and RNA synthesis. And ligases are basically enzymes that are connecting two different molecules together. So when the sugar phosphate backbone is made in a DNA, it's actually made and catalyzed by a DNA ligase enzyme. Lastly, the transferase enzymes comes into play when a certain group of molecule or functional group from one molecule needs to be transferred to another molecule. So, for example, transferring a methyl group from one molecule to another is an example where a transferase enzyme might be employed. Now, the reason for these complex namings or even mentioning these complex names to you is not to actually scare you guys off. It basically just helps whenever you're reading through biology in the future and you come across a term that ends in ase or has reductase or hydrolase or isomerase, you can first of all instantly pick up that this is talking about an enzyme, and secondly, you can figure out what kind of reaction is being catalyzed by this enzyme. So, for example, a reductase is catalyzing a redox reaction, or is basically a reaction where reduction is taking place. Similarly, where a hydrolase is involved, that would be a reaction where hydrolysis is occurring. So, just by reading the term, you'd instantly be able to pick up on the type of reaction that is occurring. But to summarize this lesson in a nutshell, enzymes are biological catalysts whose primary job is to actually reduce the activation energy for any chemical reactions that is occurring inside an organisms. Structurally speaking, they are globular proteins that are made up of amino acids, and since they're proteins, they have a primary, secondary, and tertiary structure. The primary sequencing of an amino acid within the globular protein makes each enzyme different from another enzyme, and that gives it its specific shape, which also makes them very specific for the kind of reaction that they will catalyze. But for now, keep in mind that this is just an introduction trying to introduce you to what an enzyme is. As we go along further and discuss its properties and how it actually works, and the things that affect the rate of reactions of enzymes, you'll understand far better and have a much deeper understanding of what enzymes are and what they do. So for now, we can end this lesson and move on to the next one that lets you know more about enzymes.